We're in week 2 of a series that I'm calling Collage. And as I told you last week, that really a collage is some sort of a background where all of a sudden different types of media, different types of images are put together on top of it to make a beautiful piece of art. And last week we talked about Caesar Augustus and the census that he ordered for the purpose of taxation, which is what brought Joseph and Mary all the way to Bethlehem, because they had to go back to their hometown so that they could be accounted for. Next week we're going to be looking at the shepherds, and hopefully, because his wife is, like Mary, is pregnant during this season of the year and are expecting at any time, but we're most likely will have a missionary with us next week, who's really, in my opinion, is a very modern day shepherd going to an area of northern Asia where next week we won't be able to even Facebook live our service because he's at a spot where we would compromise him if we shared his name and image at the same time on the internet. But is going to places where the gospel has never been told and sharing the truth of who Jesus is and proclaiming that God is here. That this Christmas story isn't just something that happened 2,000 years ago, it's still happening today. And then in 2 weeks on Christmas Eve morning, we'll be looking at Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, which is very fitting for Christmas morning. But today we're going to be looking at the part of the story with the wise men. And I want you to look at this picture up on the screen right now. This will be something that you're probably familiar with. It's the typical manger scene. How many of you have something like this in maybe in your house or an image where you have all your little figurines? If you're like our house right now, we have the Charlie Brown manger scene, and we have Charlie Brown in one room, and we have the manger in another room, and Joseph is standing on the stairs. It's all over the place. But when we look at this, that our understanding very quickly through pop culture, whether it's watching a movie about the birth of Jesus, whether it be a cartoon or some kind of live action or whatever it may be, or even just walking to any Christmas store, when we look at a manger scene, we see Mary, Joseph, Jesus, an angel, shepherds, animals, and wise men. Except if we actually look at the biblical text, the wise men weren't there. And for some of you, you're like, yes, I've heard this. It's always bothered me, the fact that they always talk about the wise men being there and they weren't there. And some of you, you've never heard this before. So let's go ahead. We're going to look at Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 16. And I want you to hear the first-hand account of what happened with the wise men. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea. This happened while Herod was king of Judah. After Jesus' birth, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. They asked, "Where is the child who has been born to be king of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose. Now we have come to worship him." When King Herod heard about it, he was very upset. Everyone in Jerusalem was troubled too. So Herod called together all the chief priests of the people. He also called the teachers of the law. He asked them where the Messiah was going to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied. "This is what the prophet has written. He said, 'But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are certainly not the least important among the towns of Judah. A ruler will come out of you. He will rule my people Israel like a shepherd.'" From Micah 5:2. Then Herod secretly called for the wise men. He found out from them exactly when the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem. He said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report it to me. Then I can go and worship him too." After the wise men had listened to the king, they went on their own way. The star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them. It finally stopped over the palace, or the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. The wise men went to the house. There they saw the child with his mother Mary. They bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures. They gave him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But God warned them in a dream not to go back to Herod. So they returned to their country on a different road. When the wise men had left, Joseph had a dream. In the dream, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph. "Get up," the angel said. "Take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you to come back. Herod is going to search for the child. He wants to kill him." So Joseph got up. During the night, he left for Egypt with the child and his mother Mary. There they stayed until King Herod died. So the words the Lord had spoken through the prophet came true. He had said, I brought my son out of Egypt. Hosea 11:1. Herod realized that the wise men had tricked him, so he became very angry. He gave orders about Bethlehem and the area around it. He ordered all the boys 2 years old and under to be killed. This agreed with the time when the wise men had seen the star. And so as we look at this, right away we see in the passage in verse 1 and 2 that after Jesus' birth, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. So right away we see the fact that they didn't go to Bethlehem first. They went to Jerusalem. They had some degree of knowledge about who Jesus was because they realized that he was going to be the king of the Jews. They knew that they were following a star for a particular reason. They brought gifts with them. But as they were coming, they didn't know quite where they were going and where they needed to be. So they come to Jerusalem, and they say that they saw his star when it rose. If we go back to just for a moment, verse 16, it says in the middle of it, he ordered all the boys 2 years old and under to be killed. This agreed with the time when the wise men had seen the star. So the wise men had saw the star 2 years before they found Jesus. So when we look at this, a lot of times it feels like, oh, they saw the star, and just like the shepherds who were in the fields nearby, they saw the star, and they went and found Jesus that same night. But in reality, they saw the star, and then there was a preparation period of 2 years before they found Jesus. That's quite different than what we normally hear. And so, after Jesus is born, the wise men go to Jerusalem, not to Bethlehem. They meet with Herod to find out where the king of the Jews was born. Well, Herod viewed himself as the king of the Jews. And so, as anyone who would be a king, especially during that time period, it wasn't like a presidential system like today where we can just vote in somebody new in 4 years from now. When you're the king until you either die or someone overthrew you. And so Herod gets worried because now all of a sudden, here's wise men from another country telling me that there's a new king that was just born. And he's not very happy about this. And maybe not even so much for himself, but his kids would have been the ones next in line to continue ruling. So he's looking at it from this attitude and opinion of, I want to protect my family's interests. So he gathers all of the priests and the teachers of the law and asks the question, where is this king of the Jews going to be born? They very quickly can point to prophecy like we talked about last week. If you remember, I referenced that just 8 of the prophecies in Jesus' life, and there's 61 of them, just 8 of them would be the equivalent of covering the entire planet with silver dollars, 120 feet deep, marking one of them, burying it, and then asking you to go find it blindfolded. That's how hard it is for just 8 of them to be fulfilled. But we look at this, Jesus being born in Bethlehem is yet another one of those prophecies being fulfilled. And so in this moment, Herod gets upset because the wise men find Jesus. They're warned in a dream by God to not go back to Herod to reveal the fact that he's actually there, but to go a different way back to their home country. And so they leave. Joseph gets a dream. He realizes that he's not supposed to go back to his home, because remember, they've traveled from their home city all the way to Bethlehem for a census. Once that census is done, there's no reason in the natural for them to not go back home. And so they're hanging out in Bethlehem for a little bit, and the wise men come and they arrive. And so he gets that dream and says, okay, we're going to Egypt now. Egypt would have been about, from where they were, about a 50 to 60 mile journey to get to Egypt. Basically, it would be the equivalent of saying, you're about where we are in Michigan, and we need to get out of Michigan now, and so let's cross the border and go into Ohio. And we're going to stay in Ohio until God tells us to come back home again. That's the equivalent of what they did with Egypt. And so they flee Egypt, and then flee to Egypt, and then in that moment, Herod says, we're going to wipe out all male children under the age of 2. Because the wise men had said at the age of 2, or 2 years ago, that's when they first saw the star. Now that doesn't tell us, did they see the star before Jesus was ever born? So did they see the star in the year 6 BC? And then all of a sudden in the year 4 BC, Jesus is born, and the time from where they first saw the star and Jesus being born and they met Jesus, was that a week? Was that 2 weeks? Or was it a full 2 years? Jesus was born and they lived in Bethlehem for 2 years. Because, again, they went to Bethlehem because their family was there. So it would have made sense for them to hang out in Bethlehem for a while and get help from family, because the census is done. There would be room in the inn again, simply because all the other family would have left and went back to their homes. And so it would have been very easy and very possible that they had been there for somewhere between a few weeks to 2 years with Jesus in Bethlehem. And so that proclaim goes to kill all the children who are under the age of 2. What we end up finding out is Herod dies very shortly after. It's recorded that Herod died in the year 4 BC. So depending on how old Jesus was when the wise men discovered him, Jesus could have been anywhere from like a few weeks old to about 2 years old when they went to Egypt. They probably weren't in Egypt for very long. Herod has this decree to kill all these male children under the age of 2, and then he very quickly meets his own end, and then Mary and Joseph return to Nazareth so that Jesus could be raised from the city of Nazareth and known as a Nazareth, fulfilling yet another prophecy. So this morning, there's 2 things I want us to draw from this of what can we learn from these wise men. And the first thing is simply this, is that oftentimes we have to wait on God's perfect timing, even though we may not want to. There's a lot of us that as we pray and we seek God's will for our life, we want the answer, and we want the answer immediately right now. I want to pray, and then 2 minutes from now I want, just like an email or a text message, all of a sudden that chime where God's responded 2 minutes later. Like, here's your answer. The easy bake oven version of prayer of like, here's your answer. Here's what you're supposed to do. But most of us realize that prayer doesn't happen usually within 2 minutes. It may not happen in 2 days. It may not happen in 2 weeks. In the case of these wise men, by the way, there probably was more than 3. The only reason why you think of 3 is because there's 3 gifts. So there's potentially more wise men that came, but you have this grouping of individuals who knew that there was going to be a king of the Jews coming, there was going to be a Messiah coming, and they prepared for 2 years from the moment where they first saw the star until their eyes were set on Jesus. Whatever that timeline, however old Jesus was, they had a 2-year period of time that was preparation, that they were getting ready to meet this new king. And here's the thing that for so many of us is that we kind of have this attitude of, God, if you don't answer me right now, then you don't love me. If you don't answer me right now, you don't care about me. If you don't answer me right now, then I'm not going to follow you anymore. It's really easy to put God on the spot simply because he's not answering in our timing. That you say a prayer and you want the yes answer because I want my will to be done. Well, sometimes God gives you a no or gives you a not now because it's not about your will being done, but it's about God's will being done. Sometimes denying yourself something that you want, God is actually working something bigger that's going to give you something greater down the road, something that you never could have perceived because you're being asked to wait and say not now. Not now is not no. Not now is saying you're not ready for it, or the timing's not ready for it, or that loved one's not ready for it, or just trust me. Believe the fact that if I tell you not now, it's not good for you yet. If you approach a yellow light when you're driving, that yellow light is, in essence, is a not now. You can't go through here yet. Please don't go through here yet. You may try to go through here, but how many of you have ever run a yellow light and then all of a sudden you had a scary moment because somebody else is sitting at the red light ready to hit the gas the second it turns green? And that yellow light's there to caution you, to warn you and saying, you're going to get to go through this intersection, but you got to give it time. In the right timing, you can cross here safely and you can be good, you can get to where you're going. Just trust me that in the right timing I'll say yes, but it's not the right timing. And sometimes we get a no. How many of you like being told no? There's not many hands going up on that. Because we want to get a yes answer. Nobody walks into work saying, hey, I want a raise, and let me go and talk to my boss and say, I want a raise, and they're going to tell me no. Well, that makes me feel great inside. None of you go up to your children and say, I want you to go and clean your room. No. Oh, okay, that's great. Go, let your room be a mess. When we get no's, usually it's something that we don't want. But at the same time, what if God giving us a no opens up a better yes somewhere else? And so often we have this attitude saying, God, you're not answering my prayer the way I want it in the time I want it to be answered, so you must not love me. When in reality, God's saying, just trust me. Just hold on. Something better is coming. What if the wise men had made a decision and saying, you know what, God, it's been 2 years. We haven't found this Jesus yet. We're going to give up. I mean, the Christmas story could have been totally different. The fulfilling prophecy could have been totally different. But they were willing to say, you know what, this is what God has called us to do. We're going to continue, we're going to be faithful, we're going to keep plugging along and trusting that God is in control. And you're going to see in a moment that where these wise men most likely came from goes all the way back to the time of Solomon. That God is working this story all the way into the Old Testament, all the way till now. From the very beginning of time, when we think of Christmas, Christmas isn't just this one random night in Bethlehem. It's the entire mission from the moment sin entered the world to the moment where Jesus comes back down and reigns for 1,000 years, and then all of a sudden there's a new heaven and a new earth. Christmas involves all of that. Christmas is our every single day life, because it's the telling of the good news that Jesus came. And then when we look at Easter as well, Easter isn't just this thing we celebrate once a year. It's Jesus coming, Jesus dying on a cross, being resurrected so that we can have new life. And when we regulate holidays simply to December 25th and whatever random day in April Easter happens to fall that particular year, we can have this attitude of saying, well, we're going to let Jesus have these 2 days of our life, but the rest of the calendar, that's ours. The wise men in this moment gave 2 years of their life preparing themselves, studying, seeking, how do we find Jesus? Where are we supposed to go? Let's prepare gifts. It's not going to happen in your timing. As hard as you try, it's not going to happen in your timing. It's only going to happen in God's timing. In God's perfect timing, He will reveal it and you'll understand it. Things that you're praying for now and you're saying, God, why is this not happening? Keep seeking Him. Because in God's perfect time, you'll understand and see, that's why you didn't let this happen. Or that's why this did happen. And I can't make sense of all of it, because until you see it play out and see it happen, you don't really know why. But keep trusting that He is in control. The second thing that we can take away from the wise men this morning is be prepared to always bring God your best. The wise men bring 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. How many of you that if you were having a new baby, that those would be the 3 gifts that you would want somebody to bring to the baby shower? Like, we got diapers, we got a new crib, oh, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Well, what do we even do with this? Here's the thing, is these 3 gifts, they actually kind of point out, though, what nation these people came from. As we hear that they were wise men, or that they were magi from the east. And they were from the east, but it was a little bit more southeast. That these 3 gifts indicate a very particular area of the world. That, just so as we just go through this, the 3 gifts indicate an origin in a country that has vast wealth from gold. Secondly, it had to have the boswellia tree, from which the gum that's used to make frankincense, and the comophoria tree, from which the raisin to make myrrh is delivered. So you have to have a nation that has those 3 things. And so as we look at it, there's one area that has those things, and it would have been the biblical kingdom of Sheba. The Sheba would be known today on the Arabian Peninsula, where modern-day Yemen is. But if we go back in the Old Testament, we see that Sheba, you had the queen of Sheba who came and visited Solomon and was impressed by Solomon's great knowledge and his great wealth. And that she even brought to him gifts of gold and spices. That And that's in 1 Kings 10:2. And Jesus refers to her in Matthew 12:42, saying that she brought gifts to Solomon, but one greater than Solomon is here. It continues on with this, is that the prophecy from Isaiah says that the caravans from Midian and Ephah and Sheba would come bearing great gifts of gold and frankincense to get to Israel from Sheba. The route passed through ancient Arabian kingdoms of the Midianites and Ephah. So again, these three wise men that come from Sheba, it continues to fulfill more prophecy. The Queen of Sheba becomes very impressed with the knowledge of Solomon, and what would she most likely do? She would take that knowledge, what would be at the Torah at that point, what would have been written, and take it back to her kingdom, which would include prophecy of who the Messiah was going to be. So what were these wise men studying? How did they know that when the star appeared that there would be a coming king of the Jews? Because they already had the Word of God with them, and they were studying it, and they had bits and pieces of it, because obviously not the entire book had been written and assembled yet, but they had bits and pieces of the wisdom of Solomon, so they knew enough to say, let's travel to Israel, let's go to Jerusalem. They had been there before when the Queen of Sheba came, so they knew that they could go there. They meet with Herod. They find out from all the rest of the scholars who had the entire Old Testament or the entire Torah of Bethlehem is the place to go, and they travel to Bethlehem. So you have these three gifts. We can understand about where they came from, why they came from there. But here's the thing about these three gifts. They're not random gifts. I remember as a kid always thinking, well, why these three things? They don't really make a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, sure, gold is nice. If I gave any of you a gift of gold in here, like a nice gold brick, none of you are going to turn down a gold brick in here. I mean, let's be real. But why gold? Why gold for a baby? The reason for gold for a baby is this. It was an acknowledgement of his royalty. It was an acknowledgement that this is going to be the king. This is going to be the king who is going to save all people. And that he was going to have an eternal, everlasting throne. It was a treasure. It was a gift befitting the king. So then we ask the question, frankincense. Why would you give frankincense? Because now we're just talking a spice. A frankincense was used routinely in the temple offerings. And it was a perfect symbol. It was a perfect gift to give to someone who was going to be essentially that high priest for us, who was then going to give up the offering of himself so that all sin could be wiped out and forgiven. The gift of frankincense, such a weird gift for a child, was recognizing his priesthood. So the gold recognizes his kingship, the frankincense recognizes his priesthood, so why the myrrh? The myrrh would have been a very bittersweet gift of the time. It was imported from the Arabian Peninsula in Egypt for embalming rituals. So when you think of it for a moment, these three are, I did it myself, the three wise men. The wise men who are coming, they bring myrrh, and they put myrrh in the hand of Mary. Here she has this child, this young child, and they're giving her a spice, a perfume that would be used for embalming a dead body. That's not a fun gift. The gold, you can say, has value. The frankincense can acknowledge the fact of who he's going to become, but the myrrh recognizes what he's going to do, that he was going to die. So the wise men, as they bring these three gifts, they recognize his kingship and that he is the king of all kings. Recognizes him as a priest, and it recognizes him as he's going to die and give his life for people. These three gifts, because they had time to study, they had time to watch through this 2-year period of first seeing the star until when they met Jesus, and said, we want to bring gifts that are befitting the King of all kings. And their gifts are a direct parallel to the life of Jesus and the things that Jesus was going to do for us and how he was going to live and how he was going to give up his life and how he was going to be raised again so that he could have a throne that was everlasting. When we look at their gifts and their traveling all that distance, we see individuals who knew what they were looking for. And they knew it because they took intentional time to study God's word, to know what truth was, to know that he was going to be who he said he was. Worship team, if you would go ahead and come up. We're going to be taking communion in just a moment, and those of you that are serving, if you would go ahead and step back and prepare to serve communion in a moment. This morning, as we partake in communion, we normally think of it more so on the Easter side of things, where do this in remembrance of me, do this because I gave up my body, I gave up my life. But in reality, it tracks back all the way to his birth. Because from the very beginning, from the very first moment that Jesus came on the scene, it was for that moment in which he would give his life. And so this morning, as we partake in communion in just a few moments, I want us to perceive communion with a different lens this morning. I want you to perceive it as the wise men would. That as we're seeking and looking after God, and we're doing communion as his word declares, in remembrance of him, I realize the fact that for many of you, you may still very well be seeking God, and you're saying, God, I need you to show up in this area of my life. Don't stop seeking. God is going to give you the sign. God's going to give you the steps that you need. He's going to take you where you need to go. But sometimes it's going to feel like you're wandering through the desert, and you don't know the right place to go, and you're going to be just wandering, and it may feel like it's a year. It may feel like it's 2 years. For some of you, you may feel like you've been wandering for 2 decades. But guess what? If you are faithful at following after God, he is going to reveal himself to you. If you will stop long enough to listen, to study his word, to spend time in prayer, God is going to reveal where you need to go, what you need to do. You just have to be faithful enough to do it. The wise men were willing to say, you know what? There's a star. We know we're supposed to follow this star, and we're just going to follow it. The interesting thing is they find Jesus, and then they very quickly get a dream from God saying, go back a different way. When they leave, they don't wait 2 years because God's ready to speak to them the next time. There's moments where you're feeling like everything is just happening, that you're hearing God, and you know, this is where I'm supposed to go, this is what I'm supposed to do, and then just pause. I don't have the right answer. Through a lot of scripture, you see blank spaces in the scripture. And it may just be a gap from a paragraph to the next paragraph, from one section to the next section, and you see it like, and then some time passed. What happened during that time? People had to trust and wait on God. And so for you in this room this morning, you may feel like you're in a season where everything is just happening, and it's great. And amen. And I'm excited for you that that's happening. Keep pushing forward. Keep following that star. But if you're in a moment where you're just kind of in the middle of the desert and you don't know what's going on, you don't know why it's going on, I would just challenge you with this. Keep going on. Remember the fact that Christ died for you on the cross. He gave up his body. As we're about to partake in a moment, he gave up his body so that we wouldn't have to. He died willingly for us. His blood was shed so that we could have a new covenant. And in that new covenant, we could experience a new life, one of which we don't have to fulfill a law that we no longer, or we could never fulfill, but that we could have a new covenant under grace that would forgive us of our wrongs, simply by asking for them and going to our high priest and saying, God, forgive me. So this morning, the worship team is going to lead out the song as you're being served. I'll come back up in a moment. We'll partake together, and then we'll end singing the same song in just a few.